Oh,
Damn.
I'm in the wrong place as well.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. This is one of my favorite shows, Property Matters. We talk about all things that appertain to property. We try and create talking points and hopefully enthuse, amuse, and bemuse in equal measure. Today is no exception. Property Matters is talking about inside the temporary accommodation emergency. Hamish, would you start us off, please?
Yes, I don't think there's much to amuse today. Mind
I'll
you,
try my best.
It's probably more amusing than tomorrow will be.
Oh,
At this
God.
very, very time tomorrow.
Well, I don't know. I heard the other day someone saying that the next budget may well be a joke. Who can tell? Anyway, would you start us off? What's this temporary accommodation lark about?
Oh, yes, I think we have to ask the very first question is, what does temporary mean?
Right.
Because very often we will dash away for a couple of days and that is temporary accommodation.
Right.
However, very rarely is our temporary accommodation going to take sort of 2 years to resolve, or a year, or 18 months, or even 3 months, or something of that particular nature.
That is stretching the word temporary to its ultimate limit there, really.
But we have a very big challenge on, and of course, like many of the challenges we happen to have within the property sector sort of altogether, it all stems from one major issue. There's a desperate shortage of accommodation.
Yeah.
And what we have is a situation at the moment that the private market is suffering because we don't have adequate sort of private housing stock. We don't have adequate social housing stock. So as a consequence of that, there are a lot of people on sort of doing swap overs. I say a lot of people. The councils are beginning to rely a little bit more on private stock, and private stock are a little bit worried, so they're rushing away like all get out because of what is actually sort of coming up tomorrow. So we put a shortage in there. We put this hesitancy about people to actually sort of move on and sort of get something new. They simply wanted to get out rather than get something new if they happen to be a landlord. However, in amongst all of this, we do have far too much within the shortage of housing that we do have. We have far too many of those independent little places, and some of them massive, great sort of places, parts of many buildings which contain properties which are unsafe to live in. Then it could be all sorts of reasons. We know about the cladding issues. We know about compartmentalization. We know about fire escapes. There's so many different things that can actually sort of go wrong. And of course, it doesn't matter which sector you happen to be in. It could be private housing. It could be social housing. It could be something you personally own yourself that you have to get out of. And can you afford to pay for somewhere else? Because just because you're out of the place doesn't stop the demand for the mortgage payment. And sometimes won't even stop the demand, as we found in sort of several cases. One of these I came across yesterday. The house is empty. You can't do anything with it because the way the law is at the moment, you still end up paying council tax on it, which is just absolutely absurd. It's back to the same way of putting people in a very, very difficult situation. Now, as a single person, we might be able to sort of get away with sort of something like this. But if you're a family and you actually have pressure, and somebody turns around and says, hey, look, this place is unsafe, you've got to get out of here. And we've had several people actually sort of join in with us on this. We haven't been able to sort of get any of the ones we visited previously on board. But one of the people that is joining us today is Tiffany, or Tiff as we prefer to call her, because it takes less energy actually to say Tiff. I think that's the way out of it. But Tiff herself has actually sort of been through this as a family because of certain circumstances, and it's likely to happen more within social housing in some respects, but it's not guaranteed to be social housing, as we know from Matt Hodges Long, who has got some tremendous figures on the type of temporary sort of situation that people are, or the where people have actually been told to, thou shalt leave. The sort of decanting process, which happens on some properties which are just too dangerous to live in, and people are massive numbers of people. I can't remember what the numbers are these days, but it's far too many. But at one particular sort of stage, Tiff had found herself in that particular situation. So probably let her explain. Those of you who haven't been there, it is something you don't have any control over. It
Right.
just happens, and it is imposed upon you, and you somehow have to recover from the consequences. So we better pass it over to Tiff to actually explain, because
Before I do, I just want to say welcome to a whole bunch of new people that have come on board on YouTube and also on X. I see you there, and thank you very much for listening. Tiffany, welcome to the show. I've worked with Tiffany for quite a while now, but I didn't realize that you'd been through the whole temporary accommodation. It must be. Well, I was going to ask you, would you be care to tell your story about how that happened and what your experience was?
Yeah, so as much as I've been in temporary accommodation before, I actually see myself as one of the more, I don't want to say fortunate, but I potentially didn't have it as hard as I know a lot of people have done. So it was back in 2018. So I had a 2-year-old daughter. Found ourselves, at the time, we were in a 1-bedroom flat. Housing association we were with didn't care that we were a family in a tiny 1-bed flat. Also, there was dangers within the property, not within our property per se, but there was issues where one of the tenants, a couple of doors down, was consistently setting fire to his flat. And where our flat was, to escape if there was a fire, we would have had to walk past his flat to get out. So we ultimately made the decision ourselves to leave, because I wasn't putting myself in that situation, wasn't putting my daughter in that situation. So we ultimately went and stayed with a friend for a while. Said friend was pregnant at the time, and we knew once she had baby, we'd have to go as well. So in that situation, we got in contact with the council, not the housing association we were with to start with. We got in contact with the council, explained the situation. They fully understood why the reason we had to leave.
Right.
And they said, we know you've got to leave now, but we haven't got anywhere for you. So we gave them the date that we had to leave our friend's house. We couldn't ring them. We had to wait for a phone call from them. Waited until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, all packed up, ready to go, for them to ring us and say, we've got nowhere for you. You're going to have to go to a bed and breakfast. So, as you can imagine, lugging all our stuff, everything for a 2-year-old toddler, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of stuff.
Unbelievable amounts of stuff, and not forgetting your own belongings, for goodness sake.
Yeah. To a little room in a bed and breakfast. Basically, we had the beds for all of us. And then we had a TV, a tiny fridge freezer, and a microwave, and that was it. And we were there for nearly 4 months. It was difficult, like I said, with a 2-year-old child and everything else as well. My health isn't the best as well. So in that situation, and the council just left us until we had a phone call one day to say that they had found us somewhere. But in that situation, so we had 3 places within the city that we said we'd prefer. They let us choose 3 places within the city, but ultimately they basically turned around and said, we can't guarantee you those places. Once we offer you somewhere, you've basically got to accept it, otherwise we'll take you off the list.
Good Lord. That's unpleasant. As we've got a number of comments, including that one, which I assume means that you poor sausage. So coming through that, I'm sure has made you stronger.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, we were there for 4 months, so I don't see myself massively as somebody that's and I've known families that have been in temporary accommodation for months, even a couple of years. and they've been passed from pillar to post and one temporary accommodation to another. So I do see myself as somebody that's a little bit more fortunate, but regardless as to how long you're in somewhere, the situation's the same. You've got one tiny room, no proper facilities to cook, especially like I said, when you've got children, no bathroom that's your own. You effectively lose a lot of your freedom.
Right. Well, so look, it seems to me that you are pitching from the one fire to another fire.
Yeah.
And you don't have any control over any. The other part that worries me is you're saying the housing association, you effectively had to bypass them to get any action.
Yeah.
Why was that then?
Yeah. They seem to just have the attitude of you've got a roof over your head. That's what matters. We battled with them for over 12 months to try and get something sorted. We had the fire crews out to say, look, this isn't safe. Whenever they used to come to the property, they used to say this isn't safe for the family, but they just had the attitude of you've got a roof over your head, you're paying rent, we don't care.
Right. So it was transactional. And would you say the council was more, they took longer, but more understanding?
Absolutely, yeah. As much as a lot of people have issues with councils and things like that, I haven't been able to fault ours. They were fantastic from the get-go. Yeah, yes, they struggled to find us somewhere for, like I said, a good 4 months, but from the get-go of us explaining the situation and them completely understanding why we had to do what we had to do, they were helpful. It's just
how did it affect you mentally?
It was so difficult, like I said, especially having my health not being fantastic, having a 2-year-old daughter as well at the time.
Yes.
It was probably one of the hardest set periods of my life.
Right.
It was difficult.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being brave enough to tell us your story like that. I do appreciate you very much. Hamish, it seems to me in another show that we do on Fridays, shameless plug, Cladding Matters, if a lot of those issues were sorted out and suddenly we had all these extra housing stock, flats, etc., which would be ideal for this sort of scenario. That would alleviate the problems no end.
Well, that would solve so many challenges. We have a desperate labour shortage, which prevents, if you like, we're way behind. There's no way we're going to be. We might hit 1 million properties being built within the time frame of this.
Do you remember how many the latest government and a long line of governments have promised that they would build yearly?
Oh, well, I think they've been promising it since the 60s, and it's really since the 60s we haven't hit 300,000. And it's approached. It's 300,000 we now need to reach if this government's going to get its 1.5 million. The fact that their first year was 200,000, so basically we're 500, we're 50,000 sort of short there.
So we're still playing catch up, really.
Well, we're not catching up. We're going backwards, basically, because what we've got, which Tiff didn't have, and Tiff can imagine what it would have been like. Because she went through that, she can imagine the situation now. It's not just competing with those locally. There's a desperate shortage for the indigenous population of this country to find accommodation. There is a challenge in many instances, far too many instances, and particularly when we have a situation like Tiff, some kind of emergency crops up. You have to get out of it. The properties need to be... The property, because of the dangers in the property, everybody has to be cleared out of it. But what we've obviously got now is a large number of other people coming from outside of the country, one way or another, that shouldn't necessarily be here. But the council, because of the way that this country has chosen to look after them, the council is responsible for those as well. So what you need to do is, whatever situation Tiff was in then, you need to double the challenge because there's twice as many people trying to get accommodation as there were in those particular sort of times. But I think those that will suffer most are things like families. As a single adult, we can sometimes make do. But if all you've got, like sort of Tiff said, all she's got there is this one tiny wee oven, which isn't the best of things, depending who you speak to. Some people won't even go near that particular kind of cooking facility.
No,
But
of course.
possibly a kettle. And that's the sum total of what you've got to sort of produce your food on to survive for you and the young. It's possibly you could actually sort of say, I don't know how old Jasmine was then, Tiff, but it might have been because a lot of her foods wouldn't yet be quite solid. So in many ways, you could get by with her surviving. But
yes, but it's so limiting overall. The whole situation is compressive, it's limiting, and the fact that, Tiffany, you had so little control over your ongoing destiny that
absolute freedom.
Horrendous
Freedom. I mean, freedom is one of those great things.
Yeah,
that we sort of have in life.
The great intangible.
The only thing we can guarantee these days is freedom of thought. But we don't have freedom of speech. Not that some of the time is not some of the best things you want to hear because of some freedoms which are permitted, some aren't. But anyway, the struggle is, and it will continue to be that way, is that people are put into a situation which is a temporary one, which isn't. We need to find a word beyond temporary, and I don't know quite what we actually sort of find. Our own daughter, she was in a similar sort of position when her daughter was young. In actual fact, what happened? Paula ended up stopping with friends all the time, and we looked after the granddaughter. The granddaughter lived with us for about 2.5 years before Paula was able to actually sort of get something.
I would love to think, and I'd love to say that your situation back then and Tiffany's situation, I mean, in the real scheme of things, not that long ago, was unique, but it isn't. And I think it's a situation that is ongoing, and dare I say it, Hamish, worsening. It's not just simply that we've got a whole bunch of immigrants or whatever flooding in. It's also the fact that there is no stock. There is just no stock. If we could increase the house building or reparation and sorting out these cladding nonsense, we would have enough stock for everyone. But because it's artificially reduced by not being replaced when people, I applaud people wanting to buy their own homes. Absolutely applaud that. I applaud the Thatcherite ideal of owning your own home. That's wonderful. But the problem is, if you're buying from council stock and council do not replace that stock, we end up in this situation.
I think we've got to reflect. Then we have the big challenge with central government, don't we? There's people put in a position there. They haven't run their own business. They're put in a situation. They have to find. They're floundering really.
Well,
because they themselves don't know how to handle the situation.
And also, most of them have never lived in the real world. No. They don't know the price of a bottle of milk, for instance. Tiffany, before I pass back to Hamish to finish up for today, can you tell me, looking back on that experience, do you feel that overall you were supported or unsupported?
Unsupported to start with by the people that I should have been supported by from the beginning.
Right.
Supported in the end by the people that ended up helping me.
Right. And so the council, which is unusual, can we name and applaud that council that took the right path with you? What was that council called?
It's Stoke-on-Trent Council.
Well, the Stoke-on-Trent Council, I give you absolutely a round of applause, because we don't normally hear about councils stepping up to the plate. No. But I won't, for the sake of legal issues, won't mention the housing association that you were with first of all. I think that's absolutely abuse that they let you stay beside someone who had a tendency towards arson, and at some point potentially could have ended up killing you all by dint of you having to walk past his smoke-ridden home just to get out. Hamish, what a tangled web we weave. Would you kindly take us home?
I will indeed. I will indeed. I'm on my way through it. I will mention that the poor our daughter, on moving into council accommodation, there was a problem with dampness there. And of course, with a youngster, with a sort of toddler sort of living within that, the council weren't that interested because it was a housing association house. And the housing association, I think the comment is, providing you get your rent, providing they get their rent, they really couldn't in many cases.
It does appear that there is a theme here.
Oh, there's definitely a theme. There are some remarkably good housing associations. I mean, if somebody can get in touch with us and tell us, give us some stories, somebody, and tell us how the housing associations have been, and let us actually proclaim those good ones.
That would be a good idea. Actually, yes, I absolutely echo that. If any of you out there can tell us some good news stories regarding housing associations, we'd like to offset the obvious travesty bucket of poop that we keep being told about in various scenarios. Sorry, Hamish, would you finish your
no, I was
summing?
going to say, if anybody out there can do it, come and join us and come and actually explore the situation and come up with some ideas, possible solutions that you can think of that can actually sort of help us through. It is a challenge. There's no two way. Every single political party would admit it is a challenge we find. We have to try and do something. But the trouble is, it's not even a scattergun approach, actually, because there's nothing coming out. There's no powder left in the propulsion behind it. There's just bits and pieces dropping out the end of the blunderbuss without any gunpowder. There has to be a way of working on the terrible situation we've got in housing sort of all together. But there are some lovely little stories of some helplines here, some helplines there, when people have actually turned around and actually they've pulled things out. Let's hear some of those stories.
Well, it's been yet another remarkable Property Matters. Thank you so much, Tiffany Fairbrother of All Sorts of Hats, for attending. And Hamish McClay, thank you so much for having put this together in the first place. And to all of you out there, we don't just want to hear about the negative stories. They're very easy to pick upon. We'd like to celebrate some positive news, but it's kind of hard to find sometimes. Help us find that positive news that we can celebrate a council here, celebrate a housing association there. But until next time, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.